Hello and welcome to my Sound Design Here Create video series. This is Project 2, Bloom and Wilt, Episode 1, Ideas. So let's quickly recap what this series is. This series is a set of mini-series, each of which follows a project based on sound design. We'll take that project from a basic prompt and a piece of media through creating ideas and sound design to eventually making a final piece of audio. In this case, I've already published the prompt on my community tab on the YouTube channel, but let's take a look at it. So the prompt itself is based on this image. This image is of a flower. And what is the prompt? Here is a flower. Create the sound of it blooming, then wilting. So already we can see that this is an abstract sound design project, most probably more than a musical one, but we can take it in different ways. More than just this image though, I'm basing this prompt off a time-lapse video of this flower. So let's have a look at it and let's have a quick talk about it while it's happening. So the first thing I notice is the flower raises its head slightly at the beginning. So one of my thoughts was that we could have a shift in pitch to reflect the raising of the flower's head. The other thing I noticed is that the petals seem to bloom in ranks from outside to inside. So I was thinking perhaps we could reflect the polyphony of what's playing with the number of ranks that are in action. I notice also that the flower seems to shudder at a few points. I thought it would be interesting if we could capture some of that motion and shuddering. I think the inner petals have a slightly different hue to them versus the outer petals, so I think not only should we have this sort of swelling polyphony, maybe a pad-like sound, but maybe the timbre should be different for each of these ranks. So I like the idea that the outermost petals reflect very wide stereo panning and the inner petals reflect narrow panning and different timbre. When I watch it wilting, I like the idea that the tone that we had might sort of fade into something kind of breathy, almost as though the flower is exhaling. And in the same way as we were bringing in the parts with the ranks of petals, I noticed that the flowers themselves, the petals, also wilt from the outside in. So what I'm hoping we could achieve with something like this is each of the ranks would have a different timbre and possibly a different pitch. So we're going to have a range of wide pan to gradually narrower and narrower pan sounds. Possibly, since the ones on the outside are darker, it looks like, and the ones on the inside are brighter, we might choose the higher pitch notes as we proceed in. Perhaps we'll go up in fourths. And I think what I'll also do is probably make a map of exactly the time that different events occur. So this time we can try and be a little bit more precise about what occurs and when with respect to the video. I think perhaps that when the bloom first starts, each of the petals will begin with a relatively clean timbre, even something like a sine wave. And as each petal matures, that will develop into something a little more harmonically rich. And then as it begins to wilt, the harmonics will disappear and maybe like a noise will come in underneath that, like a breath at the end there. The synthesizer I've got here today, as in the previous project, I'm probably not going to use the sounds that I generate today, but I'm going to experiment a little with the ideas that I've described. Now, because this is a monophonic synth and the sounds I'm talking about are a sort of layered sound, what I've done is I've brought a looper here. This pedal would normally sit on the floor, but I thought it would be more interesting if it was sitting here and that you could see it. So first I'm going to try and map out the shape of one of these sounds and think about how I'm going to perform that and record that in. And then I'm going to go to layering several of these sounds on top of each other, so hopefully we can get, if not a true look at what the final sound is going to be like, something that gives us a feel of the type of swell and shrinking that I want to do. So first, let's think about the waveform. I feel like a saw wave would be too bright at its brightest, and we'd have to filter it too much. Maybe a pulse wave would work. Maybe a sine wave would work, but I'm concerned it won't have enough timbre growth. So I think where I'm going to go here then is a triangle wave. So I think the basic waveform I'm going to use is a triangle. I feel like since it's a naturalistic thing, I'd be inclined to have a little bit of movement in the sound. So I have by default the mod wheel mapped to like a vibrato. So I might leave a small amount of vibrato in just so we have a little bit of movement going on there. I'm also tempted to use the sub oscillator just to have something almost droning underneath. And maybe I'll use the second oscillator an octave up, just with a sine wave, just to try and add a little weight and a little movement. I may even bring in the ring modulator. Let's just listen for now. So oscillator 2, an octave up, sine wave. Let's just try bringing it in. So you can hear it's very quiet. And the sub oscillator. So just bring it in, and let me try the ring mod. Just a little of it. So I think the way that I might want to do increase in timbral complexity here, what I could theoretically do is I could adjust the drive if we listen to the sound. But I think it's going to be difficult to animate that subtly. I think you can hear that there's quite a harsh jump in the sound. So I think instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate it with the filter cutoff. I might bring in some resonance, just so there's a bit more movement there. Sounds okay. And I might think of a touch of this filter FM, touch of distortion. So I think I prefer the 12 dB filter there, 12 decibels per octave. Just makes it a little bit softer, I think. Since this is something natural, I'm looking for a softer movement. So now I'm thinking that I'm really going to be animating this using the filter cutoff. So I think what I should do though is to ensure we don't have any sudden cuts coming in, we should have some attack there. And we can leave the K on full. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do for animation purposes on this synthesizer is just slowly turn that cut off. So now, from an animation perspective, I want to go into this more breathy sound. So let me latch that key. Let me start to turn down this oscillator and turn up some noise. And I like the fact that we have a little bit of that sub-oscillator and that oscillator 2 in there in the ring mod. It just gives us a little tone that sits underneath the rest of that. So generally, I think I'm pleased with how that's working. So what I'm going to do then to layer this with the looper is I'm going to have oscillator 1 up. I'm going to have the noise down. And I'm going to latch. I'm going to play a note. I'm going to animate the filter open by hand, and then I'm going to start rebalancing the oscillator and the noise and closing the filter down, and then at a certain point I'll unlatch it, and then that will be the end of that loop. So let me listen to the... So I think I'm going to start low, and I'm going to layer going up. Maybe I'll go up in fifths, so we'll see how this works. So I'm going to start with the C. So latch ready. And with the looper, again, this is normally foot operated, but I'm going to hand operate it just for convenience, or inconvenience, as the case may be. So this first loop is going to set the length of the loop that we record. Okay, next loop. I forgot to latch there, but I think I got away with it. Next one, D an octave above. Next, we're going for the A. This one's going to be an E. The next one will be a B. So I guess you can already hear that with the layering, because I don't have great control over the volume, everything's getting a bit busy. I'm gonna EQ it, and maybe I'll ride the volume fader a little bit just to balance things out a little. So this pass through, I'm gonna experiment with the EQ. I like that bass, so I'm gonna turn it up a little. I think it could do with some reverb, so let me add a little reverb. So I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to try and play it with the video of the flower. Now this isn't going to be in time, but hopefully it gives us a little feel for it. So I'm turning the reverb send up and the level down. Okay, so surprisingly, I feel like that actually went quite nicely. It had the right sort of timbre, it had the right sort of shape. So what I'm going to do next episode is come back with a different synthesizer, probably the Novation Peak. This was the Novation Base Station 2, and that will allow me to use the modulation matrix to hopefully make a much more refined and controllable sound. And I will probably similarly take multiple layers of that, but I might drive them rather than manually adjusting the controls. I might put automations into a DAW. And once I have the recordings and the sound design done, I think I'll come back with another episode where we mix those sounds appropriately. So that's going to be placing them in the stereo field, and it's going to be putting any effects or other things that we need in place, and revealing, hopefully, the final version of the audio that goes along with the video. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you have been enjoying this series so far, and I hope you'll join me for the rest of this mini-series and the rest of the series as a whole. But most importantly, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.